All right. So this policy memo that gets dropped on Friday of a holiday weekend about adjustment of status, saying that it's a matter of discretion and that normally the process is to consular process, and doing the adjustment of status while you stay in the US is an extraordinary form of relief and requires a matter of grace, and it is the long-standing way to receive a green card through the process. Do you agree with all of those statements?
No, not at all. I mean, I do agree that adjustment of status is discretionary, but I did a little research today, Emily, and this weekend, and I was a little curious about the history of this. So, give everybody a little history lesson. 1924 is the first time Congress recognizes the difference between people coming in temporarily and permanently. 1940 Alien Registration Act. That's the first that led to the green cards we have today. They got a separate registration document to distinguish them. 1952 is our first Immigration and Nationality Act. Congress says in there, we're going to allow this adjustment of status idea. And since then, we've had multiple statutes, Emily, that have supported the idea. We have 204J with flexibility for long delayed adjustment of status applications. What we all know as Supplement J. The EB5 Integrity Act of 2022 allows for concurrent filing of I-526 and I-485, which means, and there's a ton of others. And so we can see that over the last 70 years, Congress is working towards making adjustment of status easier rather than harder. So maybe Joseph Edler is looking at something differently than I am, but I see, 70 plus years of congressional history that this is the way it's intended. Yes, it's discretionary, but it's certainly not this tradition of Congress that we don't adjust, and that's an extraordinary remedy. I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah, I also find it funny. So you mentioned 204J, so that's AC 21. The whole point of AC 21 was to help our workforce become more competitive by allowing flexibility for foreign workers. Who have long pending adjustment of status applications, long pending green card applications waiting in the backlog. So that's kind of the background that we've had going on since 2000. And then in 2017, DHS's own regulation was titled Retention of EB1, EB2, EB3 High Skilled Immigrants. And that is what created the 485J supplement form. That is what kind of codified the regulations that AC 21 created. And so even DHS recognized that AC 21 was meant to make things easier, was meant to keep workers in the US. They called it retention of high skilled workers. Why is it now all of a sudden DHS thinks we need to send everybody outside the US? Now, there's a line in the policy memo that says USCIS acknowledges that there are exceptions, including non-immigrant categories with dual intent. So obviously talking about H-1B and L-1A, L-1B, H-4, L-2 holders, making it sound like, maybe this memo doesn't quite apply to H and L holders who are adjusting status, and they don't have to worry about showing these discretionary positive factors. But at the same time, there's this footnote at the bottom that says maintaining lawful status in a dual intent category is not sufficient on its own to warrant this favorable exercise of discretion to allow for adjustment of status. So for people who are in H or L categories, do they need to worry about this memo? Do they need to do anything different?
The only thing I would possibly do different, Emily, and I think we talked about this kind of in our first reaction video on Friday, is, and it's going to make my stomach hurt saying this, but maybe right now we maintain our non-immigrant status as best as we can in case there is an issue with the I-485. That way you don't, have this, we need to leave immediately kind of issue. Um, I would still file an I-485. I would still expect an adjudication. Maybe I throw in some evidence about, positive discretionary factors, show why they're a good person, ties to America, they've been working, paying taxes. Maybe I do that, and a short brief on it. But I wouldn't, I had a consultation today. I'm not going to not file for adjustment. And just wanted to back up for Emily real quick. You talked about all the regulations. I pulled USCIS's policy manual on Friday. It was last updated, the adjustment of status chapter, last updated May 8th of 2026. They go through a history of adjustment of status, and it says one reason Congress created the adjustment of status provision was to enable certain aliens physically present in the United States to become LPRs without the incurred expense and inconvenience of traveling abroad to obtain an immigrant visa. And then it goes on to explain why it's a good thing. And so, for our H&L holders, my first thought when I read through it was, oh, they'll be fine. And then, you actually pay attention to the footnotes. And it does apply to them. But I have to think, Emily, we're going to see this apply more towards other categories, really. Maybe if you came in on ESTA or a B visa than anything.
Yeah, I agree with you. At this point, we're not doing anything differently. We're not stopping filing 485 applications for those that are already pending. There's no additional action to take at this moment. If you have an interview scheduled, you may want to consider being prepared to discuss these positive factors and having documentation with you for that. Otherwise, there's not really anything extra to do for your 485 that's already pending, except wait and see how adjudicators actually respond to this, if there's going to be any kind of response. And the other thing that I think seems a little ridiculous with this plan, how many green cards are issued through the adjustment of status process? It's about 500 to 600,000 per year. The majority of employment-based green cards are issued through adjustment of status, whereas the majority of family-based are issued abroad. So if we're taking 500 to 600,000 adjustment of status applicants and making them consular process, there is no way that consulates have the capacity to handle that many interviews. They don't have the officers, so we're going to have to hire a bunch of more consular officers overseas, not in the US. We're not creating US jobs here, in order to handle this, on top of the fact that for most employment-based applicants, all of their filings have been with USCIS. USCIS is in the best position to look into their immigration history and determine whether they are qualified for their green card or not. Consulates don't have access to the same level of information that USCIS does. So again, for those that are getting ready to file 485, I would say file it as usual. This is particularly for those in the employment-based categories in HRL status. Otherwise, we need to just wait and see. Wait and see how this plays out, which is going to be through requests for evidence, through notice of intent to deny, potentially denials. Once we start seeing those, then we'll know how exactly USCIS officers are going to be adjudicating these applications and what changes may need to be made going forward in our filings. How about the Department of State announcing last Friday, I believe, quietly, that they ran out of EB2 green cards for India. Or for everybody. Hold on. Yeah, for India.
for India, for EB2. I thought that was interesting, Emily. I was just kind of looking at some visa news. And I saw this and I was like, maybe I'm looking at the 2025 link. Like, that just seems weird. No, the Department of State has said it has hit the annual limitation for EB2 India. It was published on Friday, and that the annual limits reset October 1st, like we all know. It's funny because I texted a colleague, a friend of mine, And you had the same reaction, Emily, about the quarterly.
Yeah, so it is specified the number of visas, immigrant visas that consulates and USCIS can issue each quarter so that they don't run out early and so that they don't end up with unused visas at the same time. So if they're following their own guidelines and only approving that number per quarter, how is it we're in May and we don't have enough visas to last us through September? On top of that, they recently also shared the number of green cards that we have available finally for this fiscal year. So we have 46,000 extra green cards in the employment-based category that are created from unused family-based green cards from last year. So that means that EB2 gets a total of 53,000 green cards instead of the usual number. And even with those extra, they still run out for India. So what does that mean for people who have a pending 485 right now?
Yeah, I mean, what we should see is similar to what we saw when we've seen, the retrogression from, I guess, the June anyway, and then 2022 we saw a retrogression. You'll probably see a case remains pending status. You can still apply for your EAD and advanced parole. They're just not going to touch your 485. Now, if you have an RFE, still respond, right? That doesn't troll any of those deadlines via biometrics and RFE and interview, any of that. It's not gone. They just can't approve your case. Now, we might see some here or there. I know anecdotally, and I don't have too much to officially back this up. Sometimes they're about to approve a case and they've gotten a visa number before they approve it. So we might see some trickle in over the next, week or two. But outside of that, it's, I wouldn't expect huge numbers.
All right. And so for the month of June visa bulletin, where we're using the final action dates, if you were planning to file, you can still file. The entire month of June is still available to file. It's just for those with pending 485s, they won't be adjudicating any in the EB2 India category. That will open up again October 1st, 2026. Do you think the data is correct here of them running out? Have you requested any particular data?
I will tell you, after I spoke with you on this morning, I quickly filed a Freedom of Information Act request. Just all data pertaining to EB2 India for this year, when adjudications occurred, how many priority dates, and all that. I'm not saying I don't trust them. It just seems very odd that this time of year we're using all the numbers, and maybe they've gone above and beyond and just super prioritized. I think it goes against the quarterly. I think this is the earliest we'd see a category unavailable. So maybe they just got super efficient. I don't know, but I think it's worth. I filed a FOIA. Took me all 10 minutes, and we'll see what we get out of it, because I just don't know if that. I'd like to see the data to support it.